The heart does not fail suddenly. It announces itself quietly, long before pain, collapse, or an obvious diagnosis appears. The beginning is unspectacular. No dramatic warning signs, no clear alarm symptoms. Instead, there are small changes that feel so ordinary that almost everyone overlooks them. Energy no longer feels as reliable as it once did. Breathing loses its former ease during everyday movements. And in the background, pressure within the body begins to shift slightly, so subtle that it is rarely consciously noticed. Yet these inconspicuous changes reflect measurable processes in blood flow, in oxygen delivery, and in the way the heart responds to stress. These early physiological adaptations often occur years before doctors speak of heart disease. And this is exactly the critical point. Those who recognize these signals while the heart is still adaptable have the opportunity to decisively influence the course, not later when symptoms become loud, but now while they are still quiet. This video is not about dramatic emergencies or late warning signs. It is about 3 silent indicators that show the heart is beginning to lose functional strength. Indicators that are often dismissed as stress, aging, or everyday life, even though they already carry clear biological meaning. What seems harmless today determines resilience, endurance, and long-term heart health tomorrow.
The heart is far more than a simple pump. It is a highly precise regulatory organ that adapts at every moment to the body's needs. With each beat, it decides how much blood, oxygen, and energy every tissue receives, at rest, during movement, under stress, or during sleep. Over the course of a day, it beats around 100,000 times and continuously adjusts its output to changing demands. What many people do not realize is that the heart almost never works at its limit. Under healthy conditions, it possesses what is known as cardiac reserve. This means it can significantly increase its performance when the body demands it. For example, when climbing stairs, doing physical work, or facing stressful situations. This reserve is what makes movement feel effortless and recovery occur quickly. But modern lifestyles disrupt this balance. Chronic stress, physical inactivity, metabolic strain, and persistent inflammatory processes force the heart to constantly work against unfavorable conditions. Worldwide epidemiological data continue to show that cardiovascular disease remains the leading cause of death. And in many cases, functional decline does not begin abruptly, but gradually, at the cellular and functional level. Before structural damage appears in the heart muscle, efficiency changes first. The heart still pumps, but no longer as economically. Oxygen delivery becomes slightly restricted, pressure dynamics shift, and the body begins to compensate unconsciously. This phase often goes undetected in standard examinations, because blood pressure, resting heart rate, and basic tests can still appear normal. Yet precisely in this early phase, the body already sends signals outward. Not loud alarm calls, but quiet clues in everyday life. Changes that show up in energy levels, breathing, and fluid distribution. They are not random. They follow clear biological patterns that repeat whenever the heart begins to lose functional strength. The first of these signs concerns something almost everyone knows, and precisely because of that, often ignores. A fatigue that no longer matches the level of exertion. Not exhaustion after a long day, but a gradual loss of available energy. This is where the first signal begins.
Fatigue is often the first perceptible sign that something is changing in heart function, and that is exactly why it is so easily overlooked. Almost everyone feels tired. Work, stress, poor sleep, or a busy life seem to offer plausible explanations. But the fatigue associated with early cardiac weakness follows a different pattern. It does not appear suddenly, and it does not disappear with rest. Instead, it develops quietly, remains constantly present, and gradually disconnects from actual exertion. Activities that once felt effortless begin to feel heavier, not in terms of muscle strength, but in available energy. The sensation is subtle, but consistent. Recovery no longer fully returns to its familiar baseline. From a biological perspective, this process begins with a minimal decline in effective cardiac output. Long before measurable heart failure occurs, the heart delivers slightly less oxygen-rich blood to muscles and peripheral tissues during exertion. To protect vital organs, the body prioritizes blood flow to the brain and heart. Muscle perfusion is mildly reduced. This redistribution is efficient, but it comes at a cost. Even small shifts in oxygen availability alter the way cells produce energy. Muscles fatigue more quickly, not because they are weaker, but because less energy arrives per unit of time. This change is measurable, yet subjectively often diffuse. The body responds with unconscious adjustments, longer breaks, reduced activity, avoidance of minor physical tasks. What distinguishes this form of fatigue from normal exhaustion is its persistence. It appears even after sufficient sleep. It fluctuates little throughout the day, and it shifts personal tolerance thresholds. The point at which energy runs out is reached earlier than before, even with the same routine. Clinical investigations show that this type of fatigue can appear years before classic cardiac symptoms. Studies using stress testing and early biomarkers have demonstrated that reduced cardiac reserve closely correlates with persistent low-grade exhaustion. Imaging techniques reveal subtle functional changes in many affected individuals, such as early diastolic dysfunction or reduced myocardial elasticity, long before structural damage becomes visible. This fatigue typically develops in distinct stages. Initially, it is barely noticeable, a slight sluggishness during routine activities or quicker fatigue in the evening. In the next phase, it appears during exertion that previously posed no challenge, climbing stairs, walking at a usual pace, or carrying light objects. Later, recovery time becomes noticeably prolonged. Even mild activity leaves a feeling of disproportionate exhaustion. Only in more advanced stages does this fatigue combine with other symptoms, such as changes in breathing or mild swelling. But by then, the heart's compensatory mechanisms are already significantly strained. The decisive point lies earlier, at the moment when fatigue no longer matches exertion, but becomes a constant companion. Medically, this signal is significant because it reflects functional changes before classical measurements fall outside normal ranges. That is why persistent, disproportionate fatigue is now considered one of the earliest outward indicators of reduced cardiac reserve. It is not proof, but it is a serious signal that demands context. Yet the body rarely sends only one signal. When energy slowly drains away, something even more everyday often changes shortly afterward, the way breathing feels. And that is where the second sign appears.
The first sign is not a disease, it is fatigue, but not the fatigue that follows poor sleep or a demanding day. It is a deeper, more even exhaustion that remains even when the body should, in principle, be rested. Physiologically, this sensation begins when the heart no longer pumps efficiently enough to consistently supply every cell with oxygen. Blood flow is not yet critically restricted, but it is less flexible. During small exertions, climbing stairs, brisk walking, mental concentration, oxygen demand rises faster than the heart can compensate. The body responds with a simple signal: conserve energy. Many people interpret this as stress, aging, or lack of motivation, but at the cellular level, something concrete is happening. Mitochondria receive less oxygen, aerobic metabolism becomes less efficient, and the body shifts earlier into an economical mode. Subjectively, the result feels harmless. Objectively, it is a measurable reduction in cardiac reserve. What matters is this: this form of fatigue does not fully disappear with sleep. It improves little with caffeine, and it appears more frequently during activities that once felt automatic. This is precisely where the heart begins to lose performance, not through sudden damage, but through gradual adaptation to increasing strain. If this signal is ignored, the body continues to compensate. Heart rate and blood pressure adjust. Hormones temporarily stabilize the system. But every compensation comes at a cost, and that cost often appears in the second silent indicator.
The second sign does not directly involve the heart, but breathing. Many people do not even describe it as shortness of breath. It is more a feeling of needing to breathe faster or deeper, even though the exertion is objectively mild. From a physiological standpoint, this is not a lung problem. It is an adaptation of the entire circulatory system. When the heart delivers less stroke volume under stress, the body attempts to compensate through breathing. More air means more oxygen, at least in theory. But the real limitation lies not in air intake, but in transport. Oxygen reaches the lungs, but it is no longer distributed through the blood with the same efficiency. To compensate for this loss, breathing rate increases earlier than it used to. This often happens unconsciously. The body regulates before conscious awareness sounds an alarm. This sign becomes particularly noticeable during light activities: a short walk, a few steps, a conversation while moving. Breathing accelerates even though there is no real exertion, and yet many people normalize this sensation, attributing it to fitness level, stress, or time pressure. Biologically, this reflects reduced stress tolerance of the cardiovascular system.
The heart can no longer buffer increased demand elastically. Instead, the body responds with respiratory adjustment. It is an early, silent signal, long before medical threshold values are crossed. If this sign is also ignored, compensation shifts once again. The body searches for another strategy to maintain stability. And this strategy leads to the third, often most underestimated indicator. The third sign is not pain. It is a subtle loss of circulatory stability. Some people occasionally feel a slight pressure sensation in the chest. Others notice cold hands, cold feet, or a brief feeling of dizziness when standing up. These sensations are usually fleeting and disappear quickly. Physiologically, they arise when blood distribution in the body is regulated less precisely. The heart prioritizes vital organs and temporarily reduces peripheral supply. Blood pressure fluctuations become smaller but more frequent. The body remains functional but less stable. This sign becomes especially evident during transitions, from sitting to standing, from rest to movement, from warmth to cold. Previously, the heart could compensate for such shifts effortlessly. Now it needs longer. Seconds that are subjectively barely noticeable, but biologically carry clear significance. Many people interpret these symptoms as harmless, a bit of low blood pressure, a circulation issue, nothing serious. But this is precisely where the danger lies. These signs often appear when the heart is already working under sustained increased load, without classic warning symptoms. When fatigue, breathing changes, and circulatory instability occur together, it does not indicate an acute emergency, but a pattern. A pattern that signals the heart is beginning to lose functional reserve. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gradually. And that is exactly why these signals are so crucial. Because as long as the heart is still compensating, it is also still adaptable. What comes next depends on whether these early signs are understood or continue to be ignored.
When these three signs appear, it does not mean the heart is failing. It means it has begun to conserve energy. Biologically, this is not a malfunction, but a protective mechanism. The heart adapts to a load that has been too high for too long, whether due to stress, physical inactivity, inflammation, or metabolic imbalance. The good news is that in this phase, the heart is still malleable. Blood vessels still respond to stimuli, mitochondrial function can improve, and the so-called cardiac reserve can be rebuilt, provided the signals are interpreted correctly. The most important lever is not maximal exertion, but rhythmic, moderate activity. Studies show that steady movement at low to moderate intensity improves the heart's oxygen efficiency without generating additional stress. Particularly effective is activity that slightly elevates heart rate while preserving the ability to hold a conversation. In this range, the heart relearns how to work more economically. At the same time, the autonomic nervous system plays a central role. Chronically elevated stress hormones such as cortisol keep the heart in a constant state of alert. If this state is not interrupted, the body remains locked in compensation mode. Breathing rhythm, sleep quality, and regular recovery periods are therefore not secondary. They are direct regulators of cardiac function. Circulation also benefits from small, consistent adjustments. Regular movement, adequate hydration, and stable blood sugar levels measurably improve vascular responsiveness. The heart works against less resistance and gradually regains functional reserve. Timing is decisive. Those who react only when symptoms become loud lose valuable adaptive capacity. Those who respond while the signals are still quiet give the heart the chance to reorganize itself. This video is not meant to create fear. It is meant to create awareness, because heart health is not decided in emergencies, but in everyday life, long before.
Many people wait for a clear warning signal, for pain, for a moment that unmistakably shows something is wrong. But the heart works differently. It adapts. It compensates. And that is precisely why early changes often go unnoticed. Fatigue, altered breathing, and brief circulatory instability are not coincidences. They are biological feedback, not because the heart is giving up, but because it is trying to continue functioning under changed conditions. Those who understand these signals gain time in which adaptation is still possible, time in which small, consistent changes produce measurable effects. Heart health does not arise from extreme measures, but from restoring rhythm, circulation, and resilience.
When you begin to observe your body more closely, you already change the trajectory, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Because the heart does not need drama, it needs conditions under which it can work efficiently. This knowledge is not a replacement for medical diagnostics, but it is the first step toward no longer ignoring warning signs, instead, toward recognizing them and acting in time.